hundreds of angry students from Maryland University clash with riot squads of state police during demonstrations against the widening war in Indochina. Similar scenes were played out on the campuses of virtually every major university in America, where students came out en masse to protest against President Nixon's decision to send American troops into Cambodia. The violence of student reaction has led nearly 400 colleges across the nation to close down completely. One look at the map shows just how inevitable it was that Cambodia would sooner or later be drawn into the Vietnam conflict. For years, the countries provided the communists fighting in South Vietnam with ideal infiltration routes and supply depots. The fall of Prince Sihanouk 2 months ago gave the American military a chance it had long been waiting for, to move into the eastern areas of Cambodia, known as the Parrot's Beak and the Fish Hook, and smash the nerve center of the communist operations in South Vietnam. This is how President Nixon announced his decision to the American people.
This is the decision I have made. In cooperation with the armed forces of South Vietnam, attacks are being launched this week to clean out major enemy sanctuaries on the Cambodian-Vietnam border. A major responsibility for the ground operations is being assumed by South Vietnamese forces. For example, the attacks in several areas, including the Parrot's Beak that I referred to a moment ago, are exclusively South Vietnamese ground operations under South Vietnamese command, with the United States providing air and logistical support. There is one area, however, immediately above Parrot's Beak, where I have concluded that a combined American and South Vietnamese operation is necessary. Tonight, American and South Vietnamese units will attack the headquarters for the entire communist military operation in South Vietnam. This key control center has been occupied by the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong for 5 years in blatant violation of Cambodia's neutrality. This is not an invasion of Cambodia. The areas in which these attacks will be launched are completely occupied and controlled by North Vietnamese forces. Our purpose is not to occupy the areas. Once enemy forces are driven out of these sanctuaries, and once their military supplies are destroyed, we will withdraw.
Even as President Nixon was speaking, the first contingents of an 11,500-strong task force were crossing into the Fish Hook area of Cambodia from South Vietnam. They were led by 2,000 troopers of the American 1st Air Cavalry Division and backed up by heavy artillery bombardments and airstrikes. According to one estimate, 2 million pounds of bombs were dropped on the first day alone. The main purpose of the American troops was to seek out and destroy the so-called Central Office of South Vietnam. This is the name given to the secret headquarters from which the communists direct their military and political campaigns in South Vietnam. According to American intelligence, the headquarters are supposed to house over 2,000 communist officers. An early reconnaissance report mentioned the sighting of a large complex of 500 buildings, many of them with radio aerials. But after 2 weeks of fighting, all the Americans had found was a large communist arms dump, and some observers began to doubt the existence of an administrative headquarters. Meanwhile, further south, the second prong of the attack was underway in the Parrot's Beak, an area of Cambodian territory that juts out into South Vietnam to within 30 miles of Saigon. Here, nearly 9,000 South Vietnamese troops with 50 American advisors penetrated 30 miles across the border, killing 500 Viet Cong within the first 2 days. Large quantities of enemy weapons also fell into their hands. Enemy casualty figures published by the South Vietnamese were viewed with suspicion by some observers, since they included estimates of those killed and injured by aerial bombardment, many of whom must have been civilian women and children. One political result of the American and South Vietnamese incursions was to shatter the precarious neutrality which Cambodia's new rulers had tried to preserve since Sihanouk's departure. The Cambodian government was informed of the operation only hours before it took place and had little choice but to keep quiet about it. No official statements were made, and many Cambodians, in fact, remained in ignorance of the momentous events taking place in their country. But the general feeling among those who did know was one of relief.
What was your first reaction to this news that the Americans had crossed the border?
Well, my personal reaction, I think I could describe it as I'm glad of it, because it's not only Americans, but somebody has to help us, and I'm glad somebody is helping us.
It is obviously a violation of your neutrality. This is going to be a slightly confused situation in the next few days, isn't it?
You think this American operation is a kind of intervention? It's confusing with our neutrality stand? I don't think so, because neutrality is fine, of course, but since there is a violation from the part of the other country, mostly, I mean, Viet Cong and North Vietnamese, this American intervention would not constitute as a violation to neutrality.
Is there a fear among the people here that if the Americans come, they'll stay, as they did in Vietnam?
I don't think. Some may feel that way, but I personally don't think that many of us would think that the Americans would stay here, because they live over there on the other side of the Pacific. While, of course, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong would stay if they ever succeed in coming.
There's a very natural fear that the war might escalate into Cambodia from South Vietnam. It's a very real fear, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is very much so. It's escalation of this war into not only into Cambodia, but it may spread into other areas too.
Is this one of the fears here, that if the Americans do come, they'll bring the war from South Vietnam with them?
It's not exactly that fear that the American would bring the war with them, but you see, we have to fight against foreign invaders. I mean, Viet Cong and North Vietnamese. So I don't think this American coming is bringing war to us, but rather helping us to fight the Viet Congs and the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese invaders.
How would you briefly sum it up?
What, it's the whole situation?
The whole Cambodian reaction.
I think the whole Cambodian reaction would be favorable for this intervention, or any intervention from anybody at all to help us out of this situation.
The Cambodian army certainly was glad to see the Americans. For 2 months, they desperately tried to stem the communist advance on their own capital, Phnom Penh, and had suffered a humiliating series of defeats. The army is nearly 80,000 strong, but over half of these are raw recruits who found themselves at the front after receiving no more than a few days' basic training. As a fighting unit, they're woefully lacking in experience and equipment. It was, in fact, arms and equipment rather than men that the Cambodian government had hoped to receive from Washington. The Cambodians' inexperience was shown up at the Battle of Skoun, a small town southeast of Phnom Penh, which had been occupied by the advancing communist forces. Having failed in their first counterattack, the Cambodians rounded up a group of resident Vietnamese and got them to walk down the road behind a white flag towards the communist positions. Once they were within earshot, they shouted appeals in Vietnamese, asking the communists to leave Cambodia.
Cấp lãnh đạo của các anh em đã công bố rằng sự trưởng thành của mặt trận trên bình diện quốc tế ngày nay là nhờ cấp lãnh đạo của các anh em.
When they reached the outskirts of the village, a shot was fired. No one knows from which side. And within seconds, the party was caught in the crossfire between Cambodian and communist troops. Reports conflicted about the number killed, but there's no doubt many were wounded, some of them seriously. The tactics of the Cambodian army in using resident Vietnamese virtually as a shield between themselves and the communists have been employed on several occasions in the last 2 months with singularly little success. After the Sang episode, the Cambodian commander on the spot said that the gambit would probably not be tried again. The Cambodians resumed their attack on Sang the next day. It took them nearly 3 hours to cover the quarter of a mile into the town, despite laying down a heavy artillery bombardment. When the Cambodians finally entered Sang, they found it deserted. Both the Viet Cong and the resident villagers had gone. The village itself lay in ruins. Hardly a building remained standing. Once they'd made their victory secure, the Cambodians invited foreign journalists into Sang to talk to some of its inhabitants. Michael Nicholson was there for roving report and spoke to a group of villagers through an interpreter.
Could you ask the man here how it was that the VC managed to get in here? Did they let them in? Did they know that they were VC?
Taพูดดังได้แต่ពេលនៃវាកងមកនឹងហេតុអីមកវាមកបានតើយើងឲ្យវាមកហើយក៏វាបឋមមកឬក៏វាឲ្យយើងដឹងមុនដែរពេលដែលវាចូលមកអត់ដឹងទេអត់ចូលមកហ្មងគ្មានដឹងទេតែដល់មកហ្មងពួកប៉ូលីសយើងមើលទៅទប់វាមិនបានហ្នឹងបាននាំគ្នាបាញ់ខ្លះអីខ្លះចេះរត់ឡើងទៅជើងនោះNo, they didn't know anything about they coming and all what he could say was that the police saw them coming and realizing that they could not resist defending the town, so they start to shoot some. And then the guards run away northward while the Viet Cong kept coming in.
How many Viet Cong came over on the first day?
On the first day?
Yeah.
ប្រហែលប្រហែលអ្នកភូវិតកុងមកមុនដំបូងថ្ងៃមុនដំបូងមកគ្រប់ប្រហែល7 8អ្នកប៉ុណ្ណឹងទេថ្ងៃហ្នឹងណា They came in separate groups. First they start with 4 or 7, a group composed of 4 or 7 Viet Congs walking along the street តាមផ្លូវនេះណាបាទមកតាមផ្លូវហ្នឹងណាតាមផ្លូវជាតិយើងណា Yes, walking along this street right here. And he's the one who was hiding and counting them.
How was it that the Viet Cong managed to get into this village without being detected?
I think while all the Viet Congs were walking upstream, from the north, and they were of course detected by the way, but there were not too many defending forces around here, so they kept coming first, and then by the way they're telling the people what they are doing here.
What did they tell the people?
They would tell the people that they are doing this fighting for Prince Sihanouk, and it's not for their own sake that they're doing at all. It's for Prince Sihanouk, so-called the father.
And this is how they managed to get into the village?
Yes.
And the villagers looked after them?
Well, the villagers did not have any choice because there were not enough defending forces.
They were threatened by the VC?
Yes. Well, you see, they by peaceful means, they try to persuade the villagers that they are doing this for Prince Sihanouk and not for themselves at all. And of course, the villagers did not have any other choice to do anything whatsoever.
Were the villagers convinced by this argument?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
But
they didn't have any choice, though.
Yeah. This kind of technique is now going all over Cambodia.
Yes.
The same thing.
Yes. The Viet Congs are very, in psychological war, they are very good at it.
How long were the Viet Cong here before the Cambodian troops arrived? Preparing?
I think they were not, you mean the troop in the district?
The VC?
No, they just kept coming and then they start shooting when the defending forces saw them. When it seemed like an imminent threat was coming up.
There were a number of Vietnamese in this village, weren't there, living in the village?
Yes.
What has happened to them?
According to the information given by the villagers here, some were helping the Viet Cong, mostly the young Vietnamese or Chinese residents.
And what has happened to them now?
Now, most of them left with the Viet Cong, and they are serving them. They were working for them as informants, riding on motorcycle here and there.
This village now is completely devastated. What happens to the villagers? Where have they gone?
Some had gone to Phnom Penh, while the other would go somewhere else in the countryside, where it's a little bit peaceful there.
And this could happen again elsewhere, couldn't it?
It could happen, I think so.
This kind of thing, this kind of takeover of towns by the Viet Cong is happening all over Cambodia, isn't it?
You mean?
The way the VC are moving in, it's the same story?
About the same. Yeah, in every place they proceeding the same way, you know.
Same pattern?
Yeah, they say that they come for Prince Sihanouk and never for themselves. But anyway, when they left, they took everything.
And left nothing behind?
No, nothing behind.
It may well be that the future course of the war will be decided not in Cambodia, but in the United States, where the dying embers of the anti-war movement have been kindled into a roaring blaze of anger and indignation. Here, on the campus of Kent University, Ohio, 4 students were shot dead by National Guardsmen as they demonstrated against the president's decision. The deaths shocked the nation, and the president only added fuel to the fire when he appeared to dismiss them as the inevitable consequence of violent demonstrations. One thing is clear. After 18 months in office, President Nixon is as deeply embroiled in the Asian quagmire as President Johnson ever was. The man who'd promised to end the war and bring Americans together now finds himself responsible for an ever-widening conflict abroad and facing bitter opposition and even personal detestation at home. President Nixon will not find it easy to heal the wounds. He's promised that American troops will be out of Cambodia within 8 weeks. If he fails to achieve that, he won't only have thrown away any chance he had of ending the war, he may well have thrown away his own political career as well.